This module in the faculty development program on the use of ICT in online and blended learning is on peer assessment. This specific module will focus on why should we do peer assessment at all. So, first let us look at the importance of assessment, and I am sure you will all agree with this, and in fact there is a lot of research, a lot of experts have also studied and mentioned that assessment has an overwhelming influence on what, how and how much students study. If anything drives student study habits, it is what type of assessment they expect to encounter. So, before we continue, let us do some reflection. List what are the various purposes of assessment. So, pause the video here, list all the purposes you can think of and then continue. So, I hope you all listed some purposes of assessment, and most likely the most common purpose that people think of is that assessment is to evaluate a learner, to rank them, to rate them and so on. Some of you may also have thought of the purpose of doing assessment is to give some sort of feedback to the learner, or maybe even to figure out where the learner is. So, there are different purposes for assessment, and where we use it to figure out, to determine where the learner is, we call it as diagnostic assessment. Where we try to evaluate or rank or rate the learner, it is called summative assessment. And the type of assessment we will focus on right now is where we use it to give feedback for a learner to improve his or her own learning, and that is called formative assessment. It is recommended that the purpose of assessment is not merely to rate or rank learners' performance, but also to help them learn better. So, this is the formative aspect of it. The question is, how as instructors should we design our assessments to be able to do so? As instructors, when we do assessment, what we are essentially doing is to give some judgment, give some judgment about learners' performance. Our goal at this point is how can we use this judgment about the quality of students' performance to improve students' learning. So, it is like a system control feedback loop, that we are making a judgment about the quality of what exists, but we are using that judgment to give feedback to improve the learning, to improve students' competence, their achievement and so on. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is called formative assessment or assessment for learning, not assessment of learning, but assessment for learning. So, here are some recommendations that an assessment system that supports learning, such a system or such a process involves learners actively participating in some productive activity. It involves a distribution of effort across weeks and topics over a whole semester, not a one-time effort. It involves the communication of clear expectations and most importantly about giving detailed, frequent and quick feedback. So, what connection does this have with our topic for this module? The idea is that one method of implementing all the above recommendations is that of peer assessment. So, what happens in peer assessment is that we can assign students a problem or set of problems or a project to do, which they submit as their own assignment, and then we allow students, in fact we ask students to review their peers, their classmates' assignments using some instructions that we have given them. So, students now assess their own peers' work which they have submitted on their own. So, students do an assignment, submit it and then assess their peers' work on the same assignment. Similarly, they receive feedback about their work from their classmates. So, in the rest of the module, let us try to see how we can use peer assessment to address these conditions. Peer assessment is known to help one's own learning. That means, if I am a learner and I do the process of peer assessment, let us say I review my colleagues' work or I review my peers' work, it helps improve my own learning because it can clarify and strengthen concepts as I am reviewing somebody else's work. Maybe some concept is unclear and I go and look up what it is about, I think about that concept. As a learner, it can also help me apply those concepts. So, suppose I am reviewing somebody's problem, it helps my problem solving application using those concepts. Another way peer assessment helps one's own learning is that it engages the learner in the process of evaluating scientific information. And as our learners, as our students become experts, as they go out to industry or go into research, evaluation of scientific information is a very useful and required skill for them to learn. So, this process of peer assessment in fact helps them improve the skill. Peer assessment is clearly a tool for self-reflection. How much have I learned when I review somebody else's work? And there is plenty of research studies which corroborate these results, that engaging students, including undergraduate students, in the process of peer assessment improves their own learning, improves their reflection, it improves their conception of what it means to learn, and so on. Moving on from an individual learner to a community of learners, such as the one in your classroom or such as the one in an online environment, peer assessment helps build community. So, this happens because the process of peer assessment can increase collaboration among the various learners. It facilitates exchange of ideas between different learners. So, for example, if there is an activity where the learner has to come up with one way of solving a problem, this student has solved the problem in a particular way, but when he or she reviews the fellow student's assignment, they will come to know of other techniques, other methods of solving the same problem. So, the multiple ideas get generated. Then there is a shared ownership of learning. So, what this means is that, let us say there is a classroom. When a student does an assignment, solves a problem and submits it, they are mostly focused on their own marks or their own learning and so on. But the moment they are reviewing each other's assignments, they are all in it together. So, there is a whole classroom, there is a community, and everybody is learning together, everybody is responsible for this together learning. So, what all this promotes is the building of a scientific community within the classroom. What about peer assessment in the blended learning scenario? So, a blended scenario has both an online component and a face-to-face component. So, what happens here is that a peer assessment process helps students apply the learned concepts in their evaluation process when they do the evaluation of their peers' work. So, in some sense this is another form of problem solving itself. And as we mentioned earlier, it helps build community, it helps exchange ideas, collaborate and so on, which is particularly important in the online setting because the learners may be distributed and they may not have much contact otherwise. Thank you.